The panel is called Toward an Enhanced Gulf Security Framework. Ellen Laipson will be running the show, but before we begin, I just want to introduce Ellen. Ellen is the president and CEO of the Henry L. Stimson Center, where she directs the Southwest Asia Project, which focuses on security issues in the Gulf region. Prior to joining Stimson, her key positions included vice chair of the National Intelligence Council from 1997 to 2002, and special assistant to the U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations from 1995 to 1997. Ms. Laipson also focused on Middle East and South Asian issues as a member of the State Department's policy planning staff, as a national intelligence officer, and then as the director for Near East and South Asian affairs for the National Security Council. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hand it over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Kate, and good afternoon to all of you. Our aspirational title for this panel is Towards an Enhanced Gulf Security Framework, the understanding being that we're not there yet. The Middle East Institute has had 63 annual conferences, and I'm just wondering if there was ever an MEI conference that did not have Gulf security on the program. Because this is something that is an enduring interest of the United States, and yet it is an elusive goal. We still have not found the magic formula for Gulf security that includes the interests of all of the states in the region, as well as the outside powers that care about the region. I think there's no doubt that even in the year 2009, we're into the 21st century, some of our security agenda has changed, and yet the Gulf region still remains a very vital geographic space for global interests and global stability. It is a region of competition of natural resources, a kind of 19th century notion that is still playing out in the 21st century. The rise of Asia only deepens and highlights this concept that the Gulf is the center of gravity for global energy security, and so there are the interests of many, many countries far away from the Gulf that care about the stability of the Gulf region. But for the societies and the states themselves, there's other ideas about security. There is turmoil within, there's tension between the states of the region, and these are things that are preoccupying not only for the United States, but for a number of countries as well as the societies themselves. Then there's the role of the United States, which I know remains and continues to be controversial in the region. Are we the security guarantor of some of the countries in the region, or is our presence a provocation? Is our presence, in fact, one of the factors that has perhaps inhibited or delayed the capacity of the regional states to figure out a regional system on their own? And in recent years, we've even been a combatant. We've had a presence in the region that has been, at least for some of the parties, very much a disturbing intervention that has created dislocations and new forms of insecurity. And was our intervention in Iraq something that brings back memories of a colonial era in the Gulf? And how do we plan the transition away from that American presence in the region? I hope that our panel, which includes people of wonderfully diverse experiences and perspectives, will use as wide an angle lens as they want to think about the questions of security. We clearly still have a series of both traditional security, political, military, defense-related policy concerns, but I hope we'll also think about human security, and security threats that come from non-traditional sources such as water scarcity, environmental degradation, et cetera. Let me turn to introduce our panel, and we've shaken up the order a little bit from the way it appears in your program. Our first speaker will be Admiral Kevin Cosgriff, who's recently retired after a 37-year career in the Navy. He was the commander of the 5th Fleet as well as the commander of the Combined Maritime Forces. He had a direct supporting role to the war in Iraq, and we can tell us more about that, but had many, many other responsibilities that included engaging with virtually all of the countries of the Persian Gulf. He's currently the Vice President of Business Development and Strategy in the Washington operations of ATK Corporation, an aerospace and defense company. I thought that Admiral Cosgriff could give us the perspective of what it's like to be on the ground and in the water, I guess we should say, actually leading and participating in the security of the Gulf region. I thought that would be a good way to begin. Then we'll go to two perspectives from the region. Emile Hokayem, who has been a colleague of mine at the Stimson Center, but recently has become the political editor of The National, the English language paper out of Abu Dhabi. Emile writes weekly columns that reflect the views of the Gulf on a wide range of security and geopolitical topics. And then we'll go to Sami Alfaraj. We're really delighted to have Sami with us. He heads the Kuwait Center for Strategic Studies. He has been an advisor to the Office of the Prime Minister in Kuwait, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Security Bureau on crisis management issues. Sami, I think, will bring us the perspective of a country that has really been always at the eye of the storm of Gulf security, that there isn't an issue we'll talk about today that doesn't affect Kuwait directly. So I'm really very honored and pleased that he'll give us his perspective. And last, we'll turn to a very distinguished authority on American foreign policy, both as a practitioner and as an analyst and a writer in his own right. Bob Hunter is currently a senior advisor to RAND and the chairman of the Council for Community of Democracies. I've known him over many years as a National Security Council expert on both the Middle East and Europe. He was our ambassador to NATO at a very critical time in developing new concepts about NATO. And I think he can bring to us, from his long experience in the field as a diplomat and as an expert, perhaps a broader conceptual way of thinking about new prospects for Gulf security. And I look forward to hearing him. He will also draw perhaps on a recently completed RAND study that looks at Gulf security. So each of our speakers will speak for 15 minutes. I've suggested that if they don't mind, they'd come to the podium, so those of you in the back of the room won't be hearing just a disembodied voice, but for the question and answers, we'll be able to just be a little bit more informal at the panel. So Admiral Cosgriff?
Thank you, Ellen. I'd like to thank the Middle East Institute for this opportunity to speak, and especially to be able to speak after lunch as opposed to before lunch, which is where I usually end up. And as Ellen said, I believe my role on the panel is rather that of the pragmatist. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not an academic. I was a Navy officer. And I'm going to share my views of the region as they may pertain to the way forward, rather than merely yet another retired admiral's trip down memory lane. I also have the responsibility, since I'm first, to try to keep us on schedule in the interest of being able to take your questions and answer them at the end of this. Obviously, as most people believe, a peaceful and accessible Gulf region is of global concern, and rightly so, because neither is it necessarily peaceful, nor is its access guaranteed. So today's topic obviously is timely and relevant, and as Ellen said, it seems to have always been thus. To frame the way I approach things and the way I think about what's going on there and elsewhere, I like to start with some very elemental and maybe obvious definitions. Security, in my mind, in the international arena means being safe from attack or the threat of attack, and the anxiety that would arise in any country or peoples in that country from attack. As Ellen pointed out, there's other aspects of security, and the Stimson Center and others are trying to expand our thinking, but for my role today, I'm going to confine it mostly to the military. Security is an essential precondition for stability, another word we hear a lot of in this sort of dialogue. And to me, that's just a set of circumstances wherein governments, businesses, and ordinary citizens can more or less have regular interactions in their respective countries and regions. Ideally, over time, you'd hope stability would lead to some level of progress or prosperity. In the case of the Arab Gulf, that relative prosperity is fairly apparent.